It was a quiet, cold evening in the small town of Maplewood, the kind of night where the streets were empty, and the only sounds came from the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hum of a car engine fading into the distance. Alex Carter, a 32-year-old mechanic with grease-stained hands and a knack for fixing anything with wheels, was just about to call it a day. He had spent the last 10 hours under hoods, replacing brakes, tuning engines, and listening to the complaints of customers who didn't quite understand how cars worked, but knew something wasn't right. Brown's Auto Repair, the shop where Alex worked, was tucked away on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, just a modest garage with 2 bays, a waiting area that smelled faintly of coffee and old magazines, and a flickering neon sign outside that read, "Open," even when it wasn't. But despite its unassuming appearance, the shop had a reputation for getting things done quickly and efficiently. That reputation was largely thanks to Alex, who had been working there for nearly 8 years and had earned the trust of both his boss, Mr. Peterson, and the regular customers. As Alex wiped his hands on a rag and glanced at the clock on the wall, he let out a sigh. It was almost 9 p.m. and he was ready to go home. His shift officially ended at 8:30, but as usual, he'd stayed late to finish up a few last-minute repairs. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since lunch and his legs ached from standing all day. Still, he took pride in his work. Fixing cars wasn't just a job for Alex, it was something he loved. There was a certain satisfaction in taking something broken and making it whole again. Just as he was about to lock up, the phone rang. Alex hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer it. After all, it was past closing time, and he'd already put in more than enough hours for the day, but something told him to pick it up. Maybe it was the nagging thought that someone might really need help. Or maybe it was just habit. Either way, he reached for the receiver. "Brown's Auto Repair," he said, his voice tired but polite. On the other end of the line was a woman speaking so fast that Alex could barely keep up. She identified herself as a dispatcher for the local ambulance service and explained that one of their vehicles had broken down just outside the shop. The engine had died completely, leaving them stranded. Inside the ambulance was a critically ill patient who needed immediate medical attention. They were trying to get him to the hospital, but without transportation they were stuck. Alex listened intently, his exhaustion fading as the urgency of the situation sank in. "Where are you now?" he asked, grabbing his jacket from the hook by the door. "We're parked right outside your shop," the dispatcher replied. "Can you help us?" Without hesitation, Alex grabbed his toolbox and stepped out into the chilly night air. Sure enough, there was an ambulance parked along the curb, its emergency lights flashing silently in the darkness. 2 paramedics stood beside it, looking anxious and frustrated. One of them, a young man with dark hair and a worried expression, approached Alex as soon as he saw him. "Our engine just gave out," the paramedic explained. "We've got a patient inside who's in bad shape. We need to get him to the hospital ASAP." Alex nodded and moved toward the front of the ambulance. Opening the hood, he shone his flashlight on the engine and began inspecting it. It didn't take long for him to identify the problem: a faulty fuel pump. It wasn't a complicated fix, but it would require some effort, especially given the limited tools he had with him. Still, Alex didn't waste any time. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, his fingers moving quickly as he removed the damaged part and replaced it with a spare from his toolbox. While Alex worked, the paramedics paced nervously nearby. They exchanged worried glances and occasionally checked on the patient through the back doors of the ambulance. Alex could hear the faint beeping of monitors and the muffled voices of the medical team inside. He tried not to think too much about what was happening behind those doors. All he focused on was getting the ambulance running again. After what felt like an eternity, but was really only about 20 minutes, the engine roared back to life. Alex stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans, and gave the paramedics a thumbs up. "She's good to go," he said with a grin. The relief on their faces was immediate. "Thank you so much," one of them said, shaking Alex's hand. "You saved our lives and his." Alex shrugged modestly. "Just doing my job," he replied. As the paramedics climbed back into the ambulance and sped off toward the hospital, Alex watched them disappear into the night. He felt a sense of satisfaction knowing he'd helped, even if it was in a small way. What he didn't know and couldn't possibly have guessed was that the patient lying unconscious inside that ambulance was none other than Richard Dawson, the CEO of Dawson Motors, one of the largest automobile manufacturers in the country. To Alex, it was just another emergency call. To everyone else, it would become a story worth telling. But for now, Alex simply packed up his tools, locked the garage, and headed home, unaware of the chain of events he had set in motion. That night, as he lay in bed replaying the events in his mind, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened. He didn't know exactly what it was, but deep down, he sensed that this wasn't the end of the story. Little did he realize how true that instinct would prove to be. The next morning, Alex woke up to the sound of his alarm blaring. He groggily rolled out of bed, still feeling the lingering effects of the late-night repair. His muscles ached from bending over the ambulance's engine, and there was a faint smell of grease on his hands that no amount of soap could completely wash away. But despite the fatigue, he felt good about what he'd done. Helping people was something that came naturally to him, and knowing he'd played a part in saving someone's life gave him a quiet sense of pride. When Alex arrived at Brown's Auto Repair later that morning, he expected things to be business as usual. The shop was quiet, with only a few cars waiting for service. He greeted the other mechanics with a nod and headed straight for his workstation. But before he could even start on the first car, Mr. Peterson, the owner of the shop, appeared in the doorway. His arms were crossed and his face was set in a deep scowl. "Alex," Mr. Peterson said sharply, "in my office." Now, confused but obedient, Alex followed him. The office was small and cluttered, with stacks of paperwork covering every available surface. A single desk lamp cast a harsh light over the room, making it feel even more cramped than it really was. Mr. Peterson gestured for Alex to sit down, though his tone made it clear this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "What were you thinking last night?" Mr. Peterson demanded, his voice rising with each word. "You left your post without permission. You abandoned your duties to fix some random ambulance that wasn't even our responsibility." Alex blinked, taken aback by the accusation. "It was an emergency," he replied calmly. "There was a patient inside who needed to get to the hospital. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." "That's not your job," Mr. Peterson snapped, slamming his hand on the desk for emphasis. "We're here to fix cars, not play hero. Do you have any idea how much trouble you caused? Customers had to wait because you weren't around to finish their repairs. And don't think I didn't notice the supplies you used from the shop. That fuel pump didn't come cheap, you know." Alex frowned, feeling a surge of frustration. "I didn't ask for permission because there wasn't time. If I'd waited, that ambulance might never have made it to the hospital. Isn't saving a life more important than a few unhappy customers?" Mr. Peterson shook his head, his expression hardening. "This isn't about saving lives, it's about running a business. We can't afford to let employees run off whenever they feel like it. You broke protocol, Alex, and when you break protocol, there are consequences." For a moment, Alex thought Mr. Peterson was just trying to scare him, a tactic he'd used before to keep his workers in line. But then he saw the envelope on the desk, neatly labeled with Alex's name. His stomach sank as realization dawned. "This is your termination letter," Mr. Peterson said flatly, pushing the envelope toward him. "Effective immediately. Pack up your things and leave." Alex stared at the envelope, unable to believe what was happening. "You're firing me for helping someone?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "That doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense," Mr. Peterson shot back. "If you want to play the Good Samaritan, go find another job. But don't expect me to tolerate behavior that disrupts the entire operation." Anger bubbled up inside Alex, but he forced himself to stay calm. Arguing wouldn't change anything. Instead, he stood up, grabbed the envelope, and walked out of the office without another word. The other mechanics watched silently as he gathered his belongings, their faces a mix of sympathy and discomfort. No one dared to speak. By the time Alex stepped outside, the weight of the situation hit him full force. He had bills to pay, a family to support, and now, suddenly, no job. The unfairness of it all gnawed at him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He'd acted out of compassion and a desire to help, yet here he was, punished for doing the right thing. As he drove home, Alex replayed the events of the previous night in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of the paramedics' relieved faces or the sound of the ambulance speeding away into the night. Somewhere out there, a person was alive because of what he'd done. Wasn't that worth something? When Alex got home, he found his wife, Sarah, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She looked up when he walked in, immediately sensing that something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "I lost my job," Alex admitted, slumping into a chair across from her. He explained everything, the ambulance, the breakdown, the argument with Mr. Peterson, and by the time he finished, Sarah's eyes were wide with disbelief. "That's ridiculous," she said firmly. "How can they fire you for doing something so selfless? People should be thanking you, not punishing you." "I know," Alex muttered, staring at the floor. "But what am I supposed to do now? This town isn't exactly overflowing with opportunities for mechanics." Sarah reached across the table and placed a comforting hand on his arm. "We'll figure it out together," she said softly. "You've got skills, Alex. Someone will recognize that. Until then, we'll manage." Her words were reassuring, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that loomed over him. Losing his job wasn't just a professional setback, it was a blow to his confidence. For years, he'd prided himself on being dependable, hardworking, and skilled. Now, he felt like none of that mattered. Over the next few days, Alex threw himself into looking for new work. He updated his resume, scoured online job boards, and even visited other auto shops in town. But everywhere he went, he faced rejection. Some places weren't hiring, others offered positions that paid far less than what he was used to earning. It was discouraging, to say the least. Meanwhile, news of Alex's firing began to spread through Maplewood. Word traveled fast in a small town, and soon enough people were talking about the mechanic who had been let go for fixing an ambulance during an emergency. Opinions were divided. Some sided with Mr. Peterson, believing that businesses had to prioritize efficiency and profit. Others, however, thought Alex had been treated unfairly and praised him for putting humanity above rules. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Alex stumbled upon a local news article about his situation. The headline read, "Mechanic fired after saving life. Was justice served?" Beneath it was a summary of the events, along with quotes from townspeople who had heard about what happened. Some called Alex a hero. Others criticized Brown's Auto Repair for its lack of compassion. Reading the comments section, Alex felt a strange mix of emotions: pride, frustration, and a growing sense of hope. Perhaps losing his job wasn't the end of the road after all. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of this. As the days turned into weeks, Alex continued, searching for employment, determined to stay positive. He reminded himself of the difference he'd made that night, even if no one else seemed to understand. What he didn't realize was that someone did understand, and they were about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. Meanwhile, miles away from Maplewood, in a private hospital room overlooking the city skyline, Richard Dawson slowly opened his eyes. The CEO of Dawson Motors was groggy and disoriented, but alive, a fact that hadn't been guaranteed just days earlier. His heart attack had struck suddenly, leaving him unconscious and dependent on the quick actions of paramedics to keep him breathing. Now, as he lay in the sterile hospital bed surrounded by beeping monitors and soft lighting, he was beginning to piece together what had happened. Richard wasn't a man who often thought about fate or luck. He was pragmatic, driven, and used to being in control. But this time things had been different. This time survival hadn't been entirely in his hands. It had depended on strangers, people whose names he didn't know but whose efforts had saved his life. One of those strangers, he learned, was a mechanic named Alex Carter. Laura Bennett, Richard's efficient and resourceful assistant, entered the room with a folder in hand. She had been by his side since the moment he was admitted. managing everything from press inquiries to internal company updates. Laura was the kind of person who noticed details others overlooked, and she wasted no time bringing Richard up to speed. "Mr. Dawson," she began, her tone professional but warm, "I've gathered some information about the incident. It seems your ambulance broke down outside an auto repair shop called Brown's Auto Repair. A mechanic there fixed the engine, which allowed the paramedics to get you to the hospital in time." Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A mechanic? You mean someone who works on cars for a living?" "Yes," Laura confirmed. "His name is Alex Carter. From what I've found, he acted quickly and without hesitation. If it weren't for him, the outcome might have been very different." Richard leaned back against his pillows, absorbing the information. It wasn't every day that a near-death experience led him to reflect on human kindness. Most of his life revolved around numbers, strategies, and corporate decisions. People were often abstract concepts: employees, shareholders, consumers, not individuals with stories and struggles. But now, lying in that hospital bed, he couldn't help but feel deeply grateful to this unknown mechanic who had stepped up in a critical moment. "Find out more about him," Richard instructed. "Who is he? What does he do? And why did he risk his job to help?" Laura nodded and left the room, already mentally organizing the steps needed to track down Alex. Over the next few days, she dug into public records, social media posts, and local news articles. She discovered the controversy surrounding Alex's firing and the backlash against Brown's Auto Repair. She also learned about Alex's reputation as a skilled and dedicated mechanic, respected by colleagues and customers alike. When she presented her findings to Richard, he listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "There's something about this guy," Richard said after Laura finished speaking. "He didn't know who I was when he helped. He didn't care about fame or recognition. He just saw someone in need and acted. That's rare these days," Laura agreed. "It says a lot about his character. Not everyone would have done what he did." Richard tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest of his wheelchair, lost in thought. Dawson Motors was one of the largest automobile manufacturers in the country, known for innovation, quality, and cutting-edge technology. But over the years, Richard had grown increasingly concerned about the company's culture. Profit margins were high, but employee morale was low. Customer complaints about service centers had risen steadily, and there was a growing disconnect between the brand's values and its practices. Something needed to change. And then it hit him. Alex Carter could be the key to turning things around. The idea came to Richard fully formed, a plan to not only thank Alex personally, but also offer him a role within Dawson Motors. Not as a mechanic necessarily, though his technical skills would certainly be valuable. No, Richard envisioned something bigger. He wanted Alex to serve as a consultant, someone who could bring a fresh perspective to the company's operations and remind everyone of the importance of integrity, empathy, and customer care. After all, if a mechanic could prioritize saving a life over following protocol, surely Dawson Motors could find ways to put people first, too. With a renewed sense of purpose, Richard instructed Laura to arrange a meeting with Alex. "Make it happen discreetly," he told her. "No fanfare, no press, just a simple conversation between two people." Laura got to work immediately, tracking down Alex's contact information through the auto repair shop and sending a formal invitation. At first, Alex was hesitant to respond. He assumed it was some sort of scam or misunderstanding. Why would anyone from a major corporation want to meet with him? But curiosity eventually won out, and he agreed to hear what they had to say. On the appointed day, Alex drove to the address Laura had provided. It was a sleek office building in the heart of the city, towering above the surrounding structures like a monument to success. As Alex parked his car and walked toward the entrance, he felt out of place in his worn jeans and flannel shirt. Everyone around him seemed polished and confident, while he carried the weight of recent failures and uncertainty. Inside, Laura greeted him warmly and escorted him to a conference room where Richard was waiting. The CEO looked healthier than Alex expected, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater. There was no air of superiority or pretense, just genuine warmth and gratitude. Alex, thank you for coming, Richard said, extending his hand. Please sit down. Alex shook his hand awkwardly, still unsure why he was there. Thanks for inviting me. Can I ask what this is about? Richard smiled. Let me start by saying thank you for saving my life. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here today. Alex blinked in surprise. Wait, you're the guy from the ambulance? The patient? That's right, Richard confirmed. I'm Richard Dawson. I run Dawson Motors. For a moment, Alex was speechless. He had no idea the man he'd helped was such a prominent figure. Wow, he finally managed to say. I had no clue. I just did what anyone else would have done. That's exactly the point, Richard replied earnestly. Not everyone would have done what you did. You took a risk. You sacrificed. Your job, to help a complete stranger. That kind of selflessness is rare, and it's something we desperately need more of in this world. As they talked, Richard explained his vision for Dawson Motors and how Alex fit into it. He described the challenges the company faced and the cultural shift he hoped to inspire. We can teach people skills, Richard said, but we can't teach them values. You've already proven that you have those. I'd like to offer you a position as a senior consultant. Your role would be to help us improve our customer service, ethics, and overall approach to business. We want to lead by example, and I think you're the perfect person to guide us. Alex listened, stunned. This was the last thing he'd expected when he arrived that morning. A part of him wanted to jump at the opportunity. It was a chance to rebuild his career and make a real difference. But another part of him hesitated. Could he really step into such a big role? Would he even belong in a place like Dawson Motors? I don't know what to say, Alex admitted. This is amazing. But are you sure about me? I'm just a mechanic. You're more than that, Richard insisted. You're proof that doing the right thing matters. And that's something we need to remember as a company. Think about it, Alex. Take your time. Overwhelmed but intrigued, Alex agreed to consider the offer. As he left the building later that day, he felt a flicker of hope he hadn't experienced in weeks. Maybe losing his job hadn't been the end of the road, after all. Maybe it was the beginning of something much greater. Back home, Sarah noticed the change in him immediately. What happened? She asked, watching as Alex paced the living room with a thoughtful expression. They offered me a job, Alex replied, still trying to process everything. At Dawson Motors, as a consultant. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you serious? That's incredible. I know, Alex said, running a hand through his hair. But it's scary too. I've never done anything like this before. What if I mess it up? You won't, Sarah assured him firmly. You've always been good at fixing things, not just cars, but problems. If anyone can handle this, it's you. Her words gave Alex the confidence he needed. By the next day, he had made his decision. He called Laura and accepted the offer, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was moving forward instead of standing still. Little did Alex realize that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test his abilities, redefine his purpose, and ultimately transform not just his life, but the lives of countless others. Alex's first day at Dawson Motors was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The headquarters was a sprawling building made of glass and steel, with sleek designs and an atmosphere that screamed professionalism. As he walked through the automatic doors, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This wasn't just a new job. It was an entirely new world. Laura Bennett greeted him in the lobby and guided him to a conference room where Richard Dawson was waiting. Richard stood up as Alex entered, offering a warm smile. Welcome, Alex, he said, shaking his hand firmly. We're glad to have you here. Thanks for giving me this chance, Alex replied, still feeling slightly out of place in his casual clothes among the sharply dressed employees around him. Richard gestured for Alex to sit down. Let's start by talking about your role, he said. You'll be working closely with our leadership team to improve customer service and ethical practices across the company. Think of yourself as a bridge between what we do and how we treat people. Your experience on the ground level will be invaluable." Alex nodded, trying to absorb everything. He had spent years fixing cars, but now he was being asked to fix something much bigger, an entire company's culture. It was daunting, but also thrilling. For the rest of the morning, Richard and Laura walked Alex through the basics, the company's history, its goals, and the challenges it faced. They talked about customer complaints, employee dissatisfaction, and the growing disconnect between the brand's promises and reality. By lunchtime, Alex was overwhelmed but determined. Laura took him to the cafeteria, a modern space with high ceilings and large windows overlooking the city. As they ate, she shared stories about her own journey at Dawson Motors and offered advice on navigating corporate life. "Don't be afraid to speak up," she told him. "Your perspective is exactly what we need. Don't let anyone intimidate you." After lunch, Alex met with several department heads who were eager to hear his thoughts. At first, he felt hesitant, unsure if his ideas would resonate with people used to dealing with million-dollar decisions. But as he began sharing anecdotes from his time as a mechanic, the importance of listening to customers, the value of going above and beyond, he noticed their expressions change. They leaned forward, nodding, asking questions. It became clear that his insights were refreshing and relatable. One of the most memorable moments came during a meeting with the customer service team. A manager named Karen raised a concern about frequent complaints regarding repairs at Dawson Motors service centers. "Customers feel like we don't care," she admitted. "They think we're only interested in making money." Alex thought for a moment before responding. "When I worked at Brown's Auto Repair, I always tried to put myself in the customer's shoes. If someone brought in a car that wouldn't start, I didn't just see it as a broken engine. I saw it as a problem affecting their day, maybe even their livelihood. Explaining things clearly, showing empathy, and doing the job right mattered more than anything else." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Maybe we should train our staff to focus less on sales pitches and more on understanding the customer's needs." The idea sparked a lively discussion, and by the end of the meeting, the team had drafted a plan to revamp their training programs. Alex left the room feeling a small sense of accomplishment. He hadn't expected his input to make such an immediate impact. As the weeks went by, Alex settled into his new role. He traveled to different locations, observing how service centers operated and speaking directly with employees and customers. He listened intently, taking notes and identifying areas for improvement. Slowly but surely, his suggestions began to take shape. Service centers started implementing changes: better communication with customers, clearer explanations of repair processes, and a renewed emphasis on quality over speed. But not everyone was thrilled about the changes. Some managers resisted, arguing that focusing too much on customer satisfaction would hurt profits. Others dismissed Alex's ideas outright, claiming that a former mechanic couldn't possibly understand the complexities of running a global corporation. Alex heard the whispers behind closed doors and saw the skeptical looks when he entered a room. Yet instead of letting it discourage him, he doubled down on his efforts. He knew the changes weren't easy, but he believed they were necessary. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Alex found himself sitting in Richard's office. The CEO had invited him for a casual chat, sensing that Alex might need some encouragement. "How are you holding up?" Richard asked, pouring them both cups of coffee. "To be honest, it's harder than I thought," Alex admitted. "Some people don't trust me. They think I'm just a mechanic pretending to know about business." Richard chuckled softly. "Let me tell you something, Alex. When I first started this company, people doubted me too. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too idealistic. But I stuck to my vision because I knew it was the right thing to do. You're doing the same thing now. Trust yourself. The results will speak for themselves." Those words stayed with Alex long after he left the office. They reminded him why he had taken the job in the first place, not for fame or fortune, but because he genuinely wanted to make a difference. Over time, his persistence paid off. Employees began to embrace the new initiatives, and customer feedback improved significantly. People started referring to Alex as the guy who fixed the company, a title that made him laugh every time he heard it. Despite the progress, Alex never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he visited local auto shops, offering advice and mentoring young mechanics. He believed that helping others succeed was just as important as achieving success himself. His actions earned him respect not only within Dawson Motors, but also in the wider community. Back in Maplewood, news of Alex's rise spread quickly. Many residents were proud of him, while others criticized Brown's Auto Repair for firing such a talented individual. Under mounting public pressure, Mr. Peterson issued a formal apology, though Alex declined to return to his old job. He appreciated the gesture but knew his future lay elsewhere. As months turned into a year, Alex reflected on how far he had come. From losing his job to becoming a key figure at one of the largest companies in the country, his journey had been full of unexpected twists and turns. Through it all, he remained grounded, remembering the values that had guided him since the beginning: kindness, integrity, and hard work. One afternoon, as Alex drove home from work, he passed an ambulance parked outside a hospital. For a moment, he froze, recalling the night that had changed everything. A smile spread across his face as he realized how much that single act of compassion had shaped his life. Saving a life had cost him his job, but it had also given him a purpose far greater than he could have imagined. And so, Alex Carter continued forward, not as just a mechanic or a consultant, but as someone who had proven that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Over time, Alex's influence at Dawson Motors grew stronger. His ideas, once met with skepticism, began to take root in ways no one had anticipated. Employees started adopting his approach, not just in customer service but in how they interacted with each other. Conversations became more open, teamwork improved, and a sense of pride returned to the workplace. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but slowly, the culture of the company shifted. People noticed that Alex didn't just talk about change, he lived it. He was always willing to listen, to help, and to lead by example. One of the biggest challenges Alex faced was convincing senior management to prioritize long-term relationships over short-term profits. Many executives were hesitant, worried that focusing too much on customer satisfaction would hurt the bottom line. But Alex had a simple way of explaining things. "Think of it like fixing a car," he told them during one meeting. "If you patch up a problem without addressing the root cause, it's going to break again and cost even more to repair. The same goes for customers. If we don't treat them right, they'll leave, and winning them back will be harder than keeping them in the first place." His analogy resonated with the team, and soon new policies were implemented across the company. Service centers began offering free follow-up inspections after major repairs. Customer support teams were trained to handle complaints with empathy rather than defensiveness. Even marketing campaigns shifted to highlight Dawson Motors' commitment to quality and care. These changes weren't flashy or revolutionary, but they made a real difference. The results spoke for themselves. Customer satisfaction scores soared, repeat business increased, and employee morale improved dramatically. For the first time in years, Dawson Motors felt like a company people wanted to be part of, not just because of its products, but because of its values. Richard Dawson couldn't have been prouder. He often joked that hiring Alex was the best decision he'd ever made, though deep down, he knew it was true. Despite his success, Alex never let it go to his head. He remained humble, always reminding himself of where he came from. Every chance he got, he shared credit with the people around him. "I didn't do this alone," he'd say during interviews or speeches. "It's the hard work of everyone at Dawson Motors that's making these changes possible." Still, there were moments when Alex felt overwhelmed. The corporate world was far removed from the garage where he'd spent most of his life. Meetings stretched on for hours, emails piled up faster than he could read them, and the pressure to deliver results was constant. There were days when he missed the simplicity of working with his hands, the satisfaction of tightening a bolt or hearing an engine roar to life. But then he'd remember why he was here: to make a bigger impact. Fixing cars had been rewarding, but fixing a company? That was something else entirely. One evening, as Alex sat in his office reviewing reports, Laura knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" she asked, stepping inside. "Sure," Alex replied, setting the papers aside. "What's up?" Laura handed him a folder. "We're launching a new initiative next month, a community outreach program aimed at teaching kids about automotive skills. We thought it would be great if you led it." Alex flipped through the documents, his eyes lighting up. "This is perfect," he said. "Teaching kids is something I've always wanted to do. Maybe some of them will grow up to love cars as much as I do." "That's the idea," Laura said with a smile. "And who better to inspire them than you?" The outreach program turned out to be a huge success. Alex visited schools, community centers, and youth organizations, sharing his knowledge and passion with eager young minds. He taught them the basics of car maintenance, showed them how engines worked, and encouraged them to ask questions. More importantly, he emphasized the importance of integrity and hard work. "Being good at what you do isn't just about skill," he told them. "It's about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching." The kids loved him. They saw Alex not as a corporate executive, but as someone relatable, someone who had started small and worked his way up. Parents and teachers praised the program, saying it gave children a glimpse into a world they might not otherwise have considered. For Alex, it was deeply fulfilling. He realized that inspiring others was just as important as achieving personal success. Meanwhile, news of Alex's achievements continued to spread beyond Dawson Motors. Local newspapers wrote articles about his journey from mechanic to consultant, highlighting his role in transforming the company. National media outlets picked up the story, turning Alex into an unlikely celebrity. Talk show hosts invited him on their programs, business magazines featured him on their covers, and strangers stopped him on the street to thank him for his work. At first, the attention made Alex uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but he eventually learned to embrace it. If telling his story could inspire others to act with kindness and courage, then it was worth it. Back in Maplewood, Alex's old boss, Mr. Peterson, watched the news coverage with a mix of regret and admiration. Firing Alex had been a mistake, and he knew it. The controversy surrounding Brown's Auto Repair had driven away customers, forcing Mr. Peterson to sell the shop at a fraction of its value. Though Alex held no grudge, Mr. Peterson reached out to apologize personally. "You were right, Alex," he admitted during their phone call. "I should have supported you instead of punishing you. I hope someday I can make it up to you." Alex accepted the apology graciously. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is learning from them." As months passed, Alex's relationship with Richard Dawson deepened. The two men developed a strong friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. They often spent evenings discussing the future of the company and brainstorming ways to keep improving. Richard admired Alex's humility and creativity, while Alex appreciated Richard's willingness to listen and adapt. Together, they formed a partnership that inspired everyone around them. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during a company-wide event celebrating Dawson Motors' record-breaking year. As employees gathered in the auditorium, Richard took the stage to deliver a speech. "None of this would have been possible without one person," he said, looking directly at Alex. "Alex Carter reminded us of what truly matters, putting people first, acting with integrity, and believing in the power of kindness. He didn't just fix our company, he fixed our hearts." The room erupted in applause, and Alex stood up, visibly moved. He hadn't expected such public recognition, but he knew it wasn't about him. It was about the message behind his journey, that doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, can lead to incredible outcomes. After the event, Alex walked outside, taking a moment to breathe in the cool night air. He looked up at the stars, reflecting on everything that had happened since that fateful night with the ambulance. From losing his job to finding purpose, from doubt to confidence, from obscurity to acclaim, it had been a whirlwind of emotions and experiences. Yet through it all, one thing remained constant: his belief in the goodness of people. As he drove home that night, Alex felt a profound sense of peace. Life had taken him places he never imagined, but he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had started as a mechanic, fixing cars and helping people in small ways. Now he was fixing lives, including his own. And as long as he kept following his heart, he knew the road ahead would be bright. Years passed, and Alex Carter's name became synonymous with positive change, not just at Dawson Motors but across the industry. His story inspired countless others to act with integrity and compassion, proving that even the smallest actions could have a ripple effect far beyond what anyone might expect. The mechanic who had once been fired for doing the right thing was now celebrated as a symbol of hope and perseverance. At Dawson Motors, the changes Alex had championed continued to grow stronger. Customer satisfaction reached new heights, employee turnover plummeted, and the company's reputation soared. People began referring to Dawson Motors not just as a car manufacturer, but as a brand that genuinely cared about its customers and employees. Competitors took notice too, adopting similar practices in an effort to keep up. Slowly but surely, Alex's vision of putting people first started spreading throughout the automotive world. For Alex, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. He divided his time between consulting, mentoring young mechanics, and leading community outreach programs. His days were busy but fulfilling. Every morning he woke up with a sense of purpose, knowing that his work mattered. Whether it was helping a struggling employee find confidence or teaching a child how to change a tire, Alex approached everything with the same dedication and kindness that had defined him since the beginning. One afternoon, while visiting a local high school as part of the outreach program, Alex met a teenager named Jake. The boy was quiet and reserved, often sitting alone during class. But when Alex introduced the group to a hands-on activity involving engine parts, Jake's eyes lit up. He eagerly asked questions, demonstrated a natural talent for problem-solving, and seemed genuinely excited about cars. After the session, Alex pulled Jake aside. "You've got real potential," Alex told him. "Have you ever thought about becoming a mechanic?" Jake hesitated before answering. "I don't know if I'm smart enough." Alex smiled warmly. "Being smart has nothing to do with it. It's about passion and hard work. If you love cars, then that's all you need to start." Encouraged by Alex's words, Jake enrolled in a vocational program the following semester. Over the next few years, Alex kept in touch with him, offering guidance and support whenever needed. By the time Jake graduated, he had secured an apprenticeship at a reputable auto shop. On his first day, Jake sent Alex a text. "Thanks for believing in me. I wouldn't be here without you." Moments like these reminded Alex why he loved what he did. Seeing someone else succeed because of his influence filled him with pride and joy. It was a reminder that his journey wasn't just about personal growth, it was about lifting others along the way. Despite his achievements, Alex never lost sight of his roots. He still visited Maplewood regularly, reconnecting with old friends and checking in on the community that had shaped him. During one trip, he stopped by the site of Brown's Auto Repair. The building had been converted into a small cafe, but the sign out front still bore faint traces of its former name. Standing there, Alex felt a pang of nostalgia. So much had changed since those days, yet the lessons he'd learned remained etched in his heart. Later that evening, Alex joined his family for dinner. Sarah, his wife, teased him about the latest interview she'd seen him in. "You're famous now," she said with a laugh. "What's next, a movie deal?" Alex chuckled. "Don't give them any ideas." Their two children, now teenagers, chimed in with their own jokes, making the table erupt in laughter. For Alex, moments like these were priceless. No amount of success could compare to the warmth and love of his family. They were his anchor, grounding him through the ups and downs of life. As the years went by, Alex's role at Dawson Motors evolved. While he no longer handled day-to-day operations, he remained a trusted advisor to Richard and the leadership team. Together, they tackled new challenges, from embracing electric vehicles to addressing environmental concerns. Through it all, Alex stayed true to his principles, ensuring that every decision prioritized people over profits. Eventually, Alex decided it was time to step back fully. Retirement wasn't something he had planned for, but as he entered his mid-50s, he realized he wanted to focus on simpler pleasures, spending more time with his family, working on his classic car collection, and volunteering in his community. His departure from Dawson Motors was marked by a grand farewell party, attended by colleagues, friends, and even strangers whose lives he had touched. During his final speech, Alex reflected on his journey. "When I fixed that ambulance all those years ago, I had no idea what would come next. All I knew was that it was the right thing to do. Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest rewards. I didn't set out to change the world, I just wanted to help one person. And if my story teaches you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate the power of kindness. You never know whose life you might save or transform." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. As Alex stepped down from the stage, Richard approached him with a heartfelt hug. "Thank you," Richard said simply, "for everything." In retirement, Alex found joy in the little things. He spent mornings tinkering in his garage, afternoons fishing at the lake, and evenings sharing stories with his grandchildren. Though he no longer worked in the corporate world, his legacy lived on. Dawson Motors continued to thrive, guided by the values he had instilled. Mechanics everywhere spoke of him with admiration, inspired by his example. Every now and then, Alex would drive past an ambulance and smile, remembering the night that had changed everything. He hadn't known who Richard Dawson was back then, nor had he anticipated the chain of events that would follow. But looking back, he realized it wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard. And so, Alex Carter's story came full circle. From a mechanic fixing cars to a leader fixing lives, he proved that true success isn't measured by titles or wealth, but by the impact we leave on the world. His journey reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can lead to the biggest transformations, and that kindness above all else is a force capable of changing lives forever.